All right, welcome into another edition of the Musketeer Report podcast. Today is May 27th, and this episode is going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. I asked for some questions on the premium message board at musketeerreport.com. You guys gave me plenty of them. I went through them. I took the ones that I thought I had something to say about, an answer of some sort, and I compiled them into a list. So for this show, we are going to go down that list of questions one by one, and I'll give you my thoughts on each of them. Before we get into that, I do want to remind you that we have a live podcast recording coming up on Saturday, June 7th from 3 to 6 p.m. at Dana Gardens, and it will feature your new head coach, Richard Pitino. He will be joining us over there at Dana Gardens for the live show. If you've never been to one of our live shows, they're usually pretty fun. It's just a typical podcast recording there in front of a live audience. The audio can be questionable at times. We'll try to work that out as best we can before the live event here with Richard Pitino. But give us a little slack on that. The vibes are usually good, and there's plenty of mingling before and afterwards, people talking Xavier basketball, all types of topics that come up at those shows off the record after the show's already ended. It usually makes for some pretty good conversation. This one is a little bit different than our typical shows, though. If you have not signed up yet, be sure to do so at the link sent out by Xavier. If you haven't seen that, I'll be sure to attach it here in this thread with the podcast on musketeerreport.com. But you do have to sign up for this one. It will go to support Xavier's NIL situation. So if you are apt to do so, feel free. All right. The other bit of news since we last spoke last week, Xavier got a commitment from North Dakota guard transfer Mir Penome. He averaged 13 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 2.4 assists last year in the Summit League. Tremendous athlete. I think that's the biggest thing that stands out about the addition there is he will likely be the best athlete on Xavier's roster. And I wrote a commitment article, an impact article. I gave some insider thoughts on the message board at Musketeer Report. So if you want to get my full thoughts on what this means, what his commitment looks like for Xavier, go to musketeerreport.com, read all of that. But the short of it is that I think for where Xavier was at in the transfer portal cycle, looking to fill out some of their last roster spots, I was expecting them to get guys, similar to the Cam Fletcher or the Roddy Anderson mold, where straight developmental or coming off an injury where they're not going to be much of a factor for the upcoming season. You're taking a low-cost risk on a guy that could maybe help you out either as a practice player or develop into something after a year of development or something like that. And Mir Penome, I think, is a little bit more than that. I mean, he's a guy that, worst case scenario, he gives you an insurance policy for the point guard position right now, this upcoming season. And that's a spot that Xavier was looking a little thin at. If something were to happen to one of these guys, they would instantly be very short at that spot prior to his commitment. So it gives you that. And then again, like I mentioned, he's going to be likely the most athletic player on this roster. So anytime you're upgrading your athleticism like that, he's going to be the best athlete on your team. That says something. And so I think it'll be interesting to watch how he handles himself in practice to start out. Who knows what his role will be if he'll play minutes this year for the Musketeers, but it seems to be, again, a better version of what they were looking for, at least in my mind, at this part of the cycle. With that being said, let's get into some of our questions that you guys asked. Now we'll start with, do we have a dude? Here's how I look at this. I think you have two guys who think they are dudes and at least have dude-like symptoms. That would be Gabriel Pazado and Wright. I think you have to start with Pazado. He's the one who seems to have the best chance. I think he's the one Xavier fans are most excited about, and for good reason. Now, will he be able to pull that off and score with that type of regularity at the Big East level? Who knows? Remains to be seen, obviously. He seems to have the best chance, though, for this team. Wright seems to be more of a dark horse candidate. I don't think people are as high on his chances to be a go-to scoring option at the Big East level, but he's got that mindset. If you watched what he did last year in Arch Madness, the Missouri Valley League tournament, he was great. I mean, he took over games on the offensive end, so he's wired to score in that way, to be a dude on the offensive end for you. I'm not sure that Xavier has many other guys, at least from an offensive perspective, that you would put in that category. That's just not how they play, their style. Now, maybe if you're saying dude, you're just talking about a bad MFer who can ball, and maybe that would apply to one of these other guys in a different way. But in terms of being like a go-to scorer, I think those are the two names that come to mind for me, and we're mostly talking about Pazado, I think. Next question. Are you higher on sophomore Pazado than you were on sophomore Swain? The way I look at that is this. I feel like Swain had a higher floor than Pazado does. We just really don't know what to expect from Pazado yet, simply because he's making that transition from the lower level, mid-major level at Evansville to the Big East, and that could go either way. I mean, we've seen guys that we think are going to be good that just it doesn't translate for them for whatever reason, and that could be on both ends of the court. So he might just be a guy who can't cut it at this level. At the same time, I think he has a much better chance than Swain did as a sophomore of developing into a go-to scoring piece for a Big East team. So while he has maybe the lower floor than Swain does, I also think he has the better chance to be a go-to offensive player and has maybe the higher upside going into his sophomore season. I wasn't as high on Dalen Swain going into his sophomore year as some others were. I was always worried about his offense, and for a lot of last year, I felt like that's kind of the way it played out. He left us wanting more for a lot of the season. Then down the stretch, I thought he started to make more of a regular impact, and we definitely saw what he could develop into. So it'll be interesting to follow the rest of his career and how it unfolds. I think he is destined for pretty good things here at the college level. But when it comes to Gabriel Pazado, a lot of untapped potential there, and also a guy who's already shown that he can do a lot, at least at the Division I level last year as a freshman. So we will see how he develops here in the Big East, but I understand why Xavier fans are high on him for sure. And I guess my answer to the Pazado-Swain question is Swain probably had the higher floor, but I'm higher on Pazado's ceiling going into his sophomore year. Do we have enough post scoring? And if we don't, does it matter in Pitino's offense? The second part of that is really more the interesting thing to me. I think we saw an intentional choice here to go to a certain style of big man this offseason. You have both Anthony Robinson and Pop Njai, who are probably defense first, definitely more athletic and open court, rim running big men than they are back to the basket, offensive minded half court players. And so they definitely fit a style, both of them do. And I don't think you're going to see Xavier relying on a lot of throwing the ball into the post and letting them jackhammer their way down and use an up and under move. That's just not how Xavier's going to play. So again, it kind of goes back to maybe more about the style on the offensive end than it does Xavier have enough post scoring or not. The way those guys are going to score, if they score, is running the floor in transition, getting on the offensive glass and catching lobs at the rim, specifically in pick and rolls. I think that's where they'll be their best. I'm sure the staff is going to try to develop them in other ways, get them better as low post scorers, but based on the style of big man that they went after in this offseason, I don't think that that's really going to be a big part of their plans, at least for this year. Maybe going forward that will change, but these guys definitely look to be both of a similar mold here in terms of their style of play. How do you see the 5 position playing out? Is it like back to the MAC days at the 5 with 3-man rotation to stay fresh, or can 2 of them play together? The way I view the 5 position is Robinson and Njai playing the bulk of the minutes, splitting those, rotating in and out. Maybe you'll see Jovan Milicevic get in there some as a third big in the rotation. But yeah, I expect those guys to be centers only. I don't see them playing together as a 4 and a 5. They do have some versatile 4 men that maybe could rotate in between either forward spot, small forward, or power forward. But I think they have enough options at the 4 spot. And I don't think it really would make sense, the style of 5s that they have, to be playing them together at the same time. So that's the way I see it playing out. Obviously, we'll see what it looks like when they actually get together and start working out together. But that's my prediction on that. All right, leaving out Roddy Anderson, who is the best on-ball defender? Roddy Anderson would be my answer to this question, obviously, so good call moving him out. I might go Borovichnin or Walker here. It's always tough to get a feel for that, in my opinion. I mean, even when I'm watching these guys on video, like I can watch all their possessions and it's just like, I don't know exactly what was being asked of their teammates. I don't know what the talk was like, the connectivity of that team. There are a lot of things that go into defense at this level where it's just like, okay, you can definitely see some physical tools. You can see can he guard the ball and keep it in front of him somewhat? Is he physical enough? All those things, but it's, in my opinion, tough to get a read if guys aren't either very good or pretty clearly bad. So it feels like a lot of these guys are somewhere in between. We'll see where they end up. But again, my answer, Borovichinen or Isaiah Walker. And that kind of leads into our next question, which is who will be our best defensive players? I tend to lean towards the front court leading this team defensively. Robinson, Carroll, Njai. I think, again, Borovichinen and Walker could see some minutes off the bench because of their defense. But I don't know that the backcourt of this team is going to be great defensively. Roddy is good. Roddy is a guy that will lead them. If he gets the starting spot, obviously that helps your team defense initially. But I'm not sure how Pazado, Moore, and Wright are going to be on that end of the floor. Next up is Trey Carroll said in an interview that FAU had him playing a lot at the 5, and he was looking forward to playing the wing at Xavier alongside a big athletic center. After watching his film, how much more effective did he seem playing on the wing, and should we expect him to take a big step forward next season playing his preferred position? I don't know about him playing on the wing. He's a power forward, but he's not a 5 either. So yeah, I mean, he will be playing at the 4 spot. He does like to attack from the perimeter. He's mostly a driver. He loves to use the spin move. I really like how hard he plays, and I like how he rebounds. I wouldn't want him to focus on being a perimeter player. I don't love that quote overall. And as for him taking a big step forward, I doubt that given the fact that he's jumping up to the Big East. I think, you're hoping he can give you the similar production that he gave FAU here at Xavier playing at a higher level. Next is, who's the guy that you think is undervalued or unheralded who will surprise as a contributor? I'm going to go with, I've got 2 names. One that I think is more of like the kind of dark horse name who people obviously know about, but isn't getting talked about as much as being a top player, and that's All Right. I think there's a chance because of his scoring ability and his mentality that he could end up being one of this team's better scorers on the offensive end. The other guy that I think, and this is more based off of things I've heard since the everything settled down a little bit, and I've gotten the chance to talk to a few more people, I get the sense that Filip Borovichinen is a bigger part of their plans than I realized when he first committed. And part of that is because we have the benefit of seeing how the entire roster played out after that. But I just think he's versatile. I think he's pretty good defensively with his length at like 6'8", 6'9", whatever he is, being able to play on the perimeter and have that versatility on both ends. I think he might end up getting more minutes than I originally expected. Next is over-under on rotation size in January. I see the top 7 playing a lot of minutes, but I could see up to 10 guys still getting in as late as January. And I think there are a few reasons for that. One is the style of play. If they're going to be playing up and down, they're going to be full court, they're going to be transition focused, they're pressuring on defense. Then I think you are going to maybe need to give guys a breather here and there a little bit more often. So you could go a little bit deeper into your bench for a minute or two to give guys a breather. Also, I think potentially just the makeup of this roster, there might not be a ton separating some of these guys. So it might not be the most talented overall, but I think you also might have a few of those deeper bench pieces that could still give you as much production as you're getting out of some of those other bench spots. So it's possible that, like I said, up to 10 guys are still seeing minutes that late in the season, but I'd focus on the top 6 or 7 seeing the bulk of those minutes. Okay, it's early, but the game is tied and X has the ball with 25 seconds left. Shot clock turned off. What's the plan? I think if things go well for this team, they go according to plan. I think Pazado is getting it. You're drawing something up for him. Whether that be a 3, whether it's getting him going to the basket, who knows at this point. We'll see. But that's ideally, I think, what you want to say here. If it's a rough season and things aren't really going according to plan, it might be something more like Roddy Anderson or Trey Carroll trying to draw a foul. Like I could see that potentially being if things aren't great for this team offensively, that's what you're looking for in late game situations. I don't know. That's a best guess at that. That's a tough question to answer, but a good one looking at the roster this early. Okay, next up is Richard has mentioned not having many set plays on offense. From your film review, did this lead to late in shot clock situations where Dent or True Washington had to bail them out last year? The way I like to look at things like this is go to what people are most familiar with. Like you knew what Xavier looked like last year on the offensive end, right? So I went back and I looked at it. Xavier last year had over 8% of their possessions come down to the final 4 seconds of the shot clock. I went and looked at New Mexico last year. They had just 5.5. So if that gives you a feel for where it's at, no, I don't think that was an issue for them at all last year. I don't think it happened more frequently. In fact, I think because they were aggressive, because they tried to score early in the shot clock, I think that was less of a problem for them than most teams in the country. They just like to be in attack mode early. At least that's the way it was at New Mexico. And based on what we've heard from Richard Pitino, that's the way they're going to try to play here at Xavier as well. Okay, do you think Pazado and Wright might have began their careers at a higher level than bottom-tier Missouri Valley teams if we weren't in the era of extra COVID years, transfer portal, and NIL deals, and a de-emphasis by many schools on recruiting freshmen? I would say probably not. Wright was an unknown commodity coming out of high school. Not even like maybe your point is that they would have put more focused on recruiting high school guys and he would have been seen a little bit more and therefore blown up more, but that just really wasn't the case. I mean, people didn't, he wasn't that athletic. He was smaller. They knew what his capabilities were on the offensive end to some extent, I think, but my guess is he still would have ended up being a mid-major prospect and would have had to prove himself based on his physical attributes. And then Pazado was in the NBA Academy program. He's from Italy, and he wasn't putting up eye-popping stats. So no, I mean, you see that happen with the international guys. They come over and it can be whoever has a connection to them or whoever is kind of looking at that moment to get the international guy, especially one who's not blowing up and is a top prospect. And those can be a bit of a crapshoot. So Evansville did a good job with him, and now Xavier's going to try their luck as well. Okay, while knowing full well that a team is as good as the sum of its parts and that we haven't yet seen this team play together yet, what do you think the result would be if last year's team played this year's team? Let's start with the fact that I don't hate the matchups. Like if we're going, let's say you could say either one, Allwright or Roddy Anderson at point guard. I think if Allwright ends up being the starter for this year's team, then you feel like you probably have a better player, at least especially on the offensive end, than Davion McKnight. If it's Roddy Anderson who starts, I think it's possible he's slightly better than Davion McKnight, but I think he's going to be a similar player, not real explosive on the offensive end, better defensively than McKnight was, tougher, but I think kind of similar in their style of play. So that feels like a bit of a wash to me and potentially a win for this year's team. Like I said, if Wright ends up being a really talented scorer, then the next one is the really tough spot for this year's group. Conwell versus probably Malik Moore. This team doesn't have someone that can match up with Ryan Conwell. I mean, I don't mean that necessarily defensively, but I just mean from a talent perspective. I feel like Conwell is heads and shoulders kind of the best player out of either team's rosters. Foster versus Pazado at the 3 position. I mean, I think we want to say that would go to this year's group. You'd like to think Pazado is going to end up being a bigger impact player than Marcus Foster was last year, but we don't necessarily know that yet. Like Marcus Foster came in with pretty solid credentials coming in from a winning program in Furman, a program that had done some things while he was there, and he put up really good numbers. So that's one where, again, it remains to be seen for sure, but you don't hate the matchup for this year's Xavier team. Again, that could very well work out in this year's team's favor. At the 4 spot, you've got Swain versus Carroll, presumably. I think that one's probably going to last year's team, especially on overall talent. But I think if in a 1-game scenario, you could see Trey Carroll getting the best of Dalen Swain, depending on which Dalen Swain showed up. And then finally, the 5 spot is going to be tough to match from a production standpoint, with Zach Freemantle scoring the way he can, going up against, I would assume, Anthony Robinson. That just seems like an advantage for last year's team again. So I guess I would probably be leaning towards last year's team. Conwell and Fremantle seem like pretty big advantages there. This year's group would maybe have a Pazado over Foster advantage, maybe a point guard advantage, potentially a slight one there. But it seems like last year's group would be slightly better. This year's team might have a deeper bench than last year's team did. One thing I would think about when trying to look at the two teams is I think if Marcus Foster were a transfer this year coming over from Furman, we'd be trying to sell him as 1A or B alongside Pazado as this year's best in the transfer portal haul. I mean, he averaged 17 and 7.5 rebounds at Furman before coming to Xavier. His shooting numbers had obviously taken a big dip. We talked about that when he transferred over, but I think there's a good chance that we'd be trying to sell ourselves on the idea that he's either the best player or right there alongside Pazado as the next best player on this year's roster. And on last year's team, he obviously ended up being whatever he was, 4th, 5th. We're talking about that starting lineup. He's probably 4th or 5th there. So yeah, that's where I'd probably leave it. And that's the last question we had in this Q&A podcast. So I appreciate all of you that submitted questions there on musketeerreport.com on the message board. Felt like this was a different idea from the Twitter spaces where I wasn't quite getting the questions that I felt like I had good answers to. So hopefully this being able to pre-screen them and come at it from a different angle there worked out well. You can let me know whether you want to see these again. We can certainly do more of them if it worked out for you guys. But aside from that, I appreciate you listening, and we'll see you on the message board at musketeerreport.com.